For my presentation, I interviewed microbiologist Bai Rui Wong. Ms. Wong is a microbiology technologist. She works at both Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and at the New York Presbyterian Hospital. She has approximately 20 years of experience working as a microbiologist with a focus on parasitology. The most common three parasites that she's encountered are Entomobia coli, Entomobia histolytica, and ticks. The ticks she encounters in this region are typically Ixodes scapularis, Amblyomma americanum, and Dermacantor variabilis. Entomobia coli is a common, generally harmless amoeba parasite. It is frequently confused with E. histolytica, which has potential pathogenic qualities. It is generally identified by microscopy in a stool sample with unfixed stools, and that there are now newer molecular biological techniques like PCR and immunotests to identify the parasite. Entomobia histolytica is a common and still generally harmless amoeba parasite. Approximately 90% of cases are asymptomatic. It may be a concern in more immunocompromised patients, and it mostly colonizes the bowels, but in rare circumstances, for unknown reasons, it can penetrate the bowels and infect the blood and organs. This ultimately can lead to ulcerations, which are considered a serious condition. Our case study, however, is going to focus on ticks. Across the Long Island and Hudson River Valley region, there are three major tick species of concerns: Ixodes scapularis, Amblyomma americanum, Dermacantor, and Dermacantor variabilis. A case involving ticks is primarily concerned with the identification of the particular species of tick, which has attached itself to a human host. Identification is important because each species may act as a vector for a variety of diseases. Identification allows the diagnosis of a patient or provides early warning that a disease may have been transmitted. We will consider the morphological differences between species and the diseases and other parasites for which each species acts as a vector or host. First, some general information about ticks. They are members of the phylum Arthropoda, the class Arachnida, the order Ixodia, and all of the ticks here are of the family Ixodidae, the hard ticks or scale ticks. They are ectoparasites and or micropredators. There are hundreds of species and there are over more than a dozen genera. They are extremely hardy and resistant arthropods, and their life cycle involves multiple hosts and generally takes several years. As you can see from these maps, each of the tick species has a range that covers the eastern seaboard. When the ticks bite, the bite is generally slow and painless. Feeding and indeed transmission of diseases takes many hours or days. 3 stages of the tick's lifestyle requires a blood meal before it can progress to the next stage. The larva, nymph, and adult must each take a blood meal. Nymphs and adults may each be infectious with a variety of bacterial or other parasitic diseases. On their own, ticks are basically harmless, and only a severe infestation would lead to any sort of symptoms due to blood loss. The risk associated with ticks is due to the bacteria and other sorts of parasites that they carry. Control of these vectors is through treatment of pets with anti-tick medications, avoidance and awareness of the ranges, and screening in the cases where you may have been exposed. Here we see the tick life cycle. Their eggs, which are laid in the ground, hatch in the springtime. The eggs hatch into 6-legged larvae, which are generally not infectious as they haven't had a blood meal to acquire the bacteria or other pathogens that they may spread. After a blood meal, the larva will develop into nymphs. The nymphs will then take another blood meal, develop into adults, and the adults will then find a final host, and the female in particular will feed and mate, then fall off the host, lay eggs, and then die. Here we see Ixodes scapularis. It is best identified by its interiorly located and inverted anal groove, which you'll see is very different compared to the other two species. It also lacks festoons, and compared to the other species, it has elongated palps. Here we see Amblyona americanum. You'll note that it has festoons, unlike I. scapularis, and here you'll see that I. scapularis has an inverted anal groove compared to A. americanum. Americanum, compared to the other species, also has fairly elongated palps, and it is notable for the bright white dot on its dorsal section. This is at least in females. It is also notable for white enameled look on some of its festoons. Here we see Dermacanter variabilis. It's most noticeable for its short, stubby mouth parts. You can see how this is the best way to identify it compared to Amblyoma americanum. It has a ornate dorsal shield, and like A. americanum, it has a regular U-shaped and posterior anal groove. It also has festoons, but they are less notable and not enameled. Of the three species of ticks, Zoetis scapularis is probably associated with the most dangerous and severe diseases. Some of note are Babesia microti and Borrelia burgdorferi, which is the agent responsible for Lyme's disease. Another one of note is Anaplasma phagocytophilium. Amblyona americanum is most known for starry, or southern tick-associated rash illness. It is similar in presentation to Lyme's disease, though it is considered to be considerably less dangerous. It also is known to be infested with several forms of Rickettsia bacteria and can cause tularemia. Dermacanter variabilis is also associated with tularemia, but the most dangerous disease it is known to carry is caused by Rickettsia rickettsii, and it causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever, which can be fatal. The most unusual parasite that Ms. Wong has encountered is an infection with Babesia, or Babesia microti, which is carried by Zoetis scapularis ticks. Here we see the life cycle of Babesia microti. You'll note that the tick acts as the definitive host, and the Babesia replicates in the tick, and then the sporophyte form can be transferred to humans through a bite. Identification of D. microti can be an interesting process because it can, in some forms, look so similar to Plasmodium. Here you can see the telltale rings and how similar they are in Babesia and Plasmodium. But Babesia is notable for the famous Maltese cross form, which in infected white blood cells, red blood cells, which distinguishes it from Plasmodium. D. microti can be treated. Historically, treatments involved quinine, much like for malaria, but more modern treatments involve atovaquone and azithromycin. Control is generally through awareness of vectors, ticks, avoidance, and screening of oneself after possibly being exposed. There are a few other questions I asked Ms. Wong about if the parasites she encountered at MSKCC reflect the most common parasites found in the city or region. Her answer was both yes and no. In New York City, many of the parasites spotted are from tropical regions, from either immigrants or people who've recently been traveling. So parasites like Giardia are more commonly encountered at general hospitals, but they're not usually encountered at cancer hospitals like MSKCC, where the patients haven't been traveling. I also asked her other questions, such as, are there parasites more commonly encountered in cancer patients or in immunocompromised patients, and does this impact treatment options? Her answer was generally no, and she encounters many fewer parasites in her work at MSKCC compared to working at a general hospital. In some cases, an infection may impact treatment, as cancer patients can be immunologically compromised, And that would be up to the doctor to make sure that that was treated prior to an immunocompromising situation. Here are my references, mostly for the photos, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.